Okay, welcome to this session, Design Education Concepts and Comparisons. My name is Yvonne Eriksson. I'm a professor in information design at Mälardalen University, and I share this session. And I will start to shortly present all the speakers, and then we will listen to the recorded presentations afterwards. And after that, we will have about 30 minutes for discussion. The first presentation will be by Katja Thoring, and she is at Anhalt University of Applied Science, Germany, and Delft University of Technology in Netherlands. And her presentation is From Bauhaus to Design Thinking and Beyond, a comparison of two design educational schools. The second presenter will be Nusha Pham, and it's about entrepreneurial mindset development in business and engineering education, an experiment. And Nusha Pham is from Queen's University in Canada. And the third presentation will be by Sudhir Varandarayan from, it's hard to see here, it's very blurry, but it's, okay, he's from the Indian Institute of Information Technology, Design and Manufacturing, I think. And the presentation is measuring the value of systems thinking for design-centric engineering education. Was it right, or are you in some other place? No, I think it's right.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. And the fourth presentation is by Sambul Khan, and she will talk about State of Design Education in Singapore, Insight from Design Education Summit 2018. And she is at the SUTD MIT International Design Center based in Singapore. And the last presenter is Sharon Guaman Quintanilla, and she will talk about mapping impact of design thinking in teamwork, problem solving, and creativity. And she is at the, let me see here, at the Center of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, I think in Belgium. Or can you please confirm that, because I can't read this what I have in front of me. So please, if there is anything you wanted to add, so please, we can listen to the presentations now.
From the Bauhaus to Design Thinking and Beyond. In this paper, we are going to present a systematic comparison of two influential design schools that are 100 years apart. At first sight, they might look very different, but we would like to investigate why both were so successful. This leads us to the following research questions. What differences and similarities can be identified in contemporary design thinking education and the historic Bauhaus school? And what can we learn from these insights about design education today? We conducted a comparative multi-case study in two institutions, the Bauhaus and the HPID school in Potsdam, Germany. We chose the D School in Potsdam because we consider it a typical example of design thinking education, and also because two of this paper's authors have worked there for several years and hence have a deep access to this institution. Additionally, two of these paper's authors work at Anhalt University in Dessau, which is a design school in close neighborhood and close cooperation with the Bauhaus Foundation. Our data sources were personal discussions with experts from the Bauhaus Foundation and the D School, archive documents like photographs and teaching materials from both institutions, observations of current practices at the D School, and additional literature research. Through triangulation of these four data sources, 6 categories of interest emerged that we compared in more detail. Both institutions have a curriculum with increasing complexity. At the D School, these are 2 tracks, and the projects range from 1 week to 12 weeks of consecutive projects. At the Bauhaus, the curriculum is aligned in 3 phases. It starts with a preliminary preparatory course, the so-called forecourse, and the foundations are all taught to all students. Later on, the students focus on different materials in different workshops, And finally, the main goal with the highest complexity was considered the architectural building workshop. Both institutions have a strong focus on multidisciplinarity. At the D School, multidisciplinarity can be found in teams. Students and teachers with different backgrounds come together and bring in their unique expertise and work as a team. Whereas at the Bauhaus, we see a focus on multidisciplinary individuals. For example, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, one of the Bauhaus Meisters, was a painter, a photographer, a typographer, a stage designer, and a filmmaker. This kind of multidisciplinarity was also taught to the students. Both institutions propagated a peculiar mindset and culture, which is very experimental, casual, and also a little bit eccentric. For example, at the D School, there are regular warm-ups, like games to loosen up and to increase creativity. At the Bauhaus, we have, for example, a class called Harmonization Theory, taught by Gertrud Grunow, which was focusing on bodily health, for example, with dancing and breathing exercises. Both institutions have a specific study environment with open structures, flexible furniture, and a lot of light. In both institutions, this was considered to increase creativity. Both institutions focus on people's needs and radical innovation. At the D School, there is a focus on solving wicked problems, whereas at the Bauhaus, there's a focus on social and technical innovations. But both have a strong emphasis on the user needs. At the D School, this is called desirability, whereas the Bauhaus was seeking unity of art, technology, and life, where the life component resembles the user's interest and the user's needs. Both institutions were established in a very different socioeconomic context. Today, we are facing saturated markets and disruptive technologies, whereas in the 1920s, the environment was characterized by political disturbances and scarcity. This also led to different goals of the study programs to develop innovations, particularly targeting at these specific contexts. More examples for each of the 6 categories can be found in the paper. To summarize now, what do these 2 institutions have in common? Both can be considered radical for their respective times. Both teaching concepts were somewhat different than the status quo. Both questioned the design educational standards and aimed at innovation and radical change. Both pursued user-centered approaches and had peculiar study environments. And both institutions propagated a specific mindset and culture and involved multidisciplinary approaches. So this leads to our second research question: what is the impact of these 2 study programs on design education today? Although both institutions had similar goals and methods, the context has changed. Societal problems have become more complex, also called wicked, and are less characterized by scarcity. At the Bauhaus, students were educated in different disciplinary skills in order to solve the technical problems at the time and to make products more affordable for the masses. Today, we need more individual experts that work as a multidisciplinary team together in order to tackle the big challenges. Students in design thinking are trained in the required methods and processes to conduct teamwork and to communicate across disciplines. So the insights that we gained from our comparative study led to a claim that we would like to propose as a concluding statement. We argue that design thinking is the preparatory course or the forecourse of the 21st century. Other than the Bauhaus forecourse, which had the goal to train people in different disciplinary skills, the design thinking education trains people in the methods and principles that are needed to work together, and therefore it educates people from all disciplines to work together and to tackle today's grand challenges. Of course, this statement is open for discussion. Thank you.
This is a quick video presentation of the paper titled Entrepreneurial Mindset Development in Business and Engineering Education, an Experiment. The paper was written by Nusha Fine from Smith Business School, Queen's University, Canada, and Nikola Vukashinovic, Faculty of Mechanical Engineering, University of Ljubljana, Slovenia. In today's business environment, entrepreneurship seems to be the key skill required to successfully drive innovation in the marketplace. Entrepreneurship is all about taking the innovative solutions that engineers, scientists, and even business people produce and bringing them into the market successfully. It is therefore paramount that both engineering, science, business students develop an entrepreneurial mindset so they can ensure that after they go into their jobs and develop different innovative solutions, they can bring them to the market successfully. We wanted to test with the experiments that we're going to present into this presentation, whether we can foster entrepreneurial mindset across disciplines to drive innovation post-education. Let me quickly run you through the experiment that we set up. Based on an in-depth literature review, we identified 7 entrepreneurial mindset traits that were relevant for a successful entrepreneur in today's business environment. Based on those traits, we developed a self-assessment survey. That survey was given at the start of an entrepreneurship course to a set of business students and a set of engineering students. They then ran through a similar course where they developed an initial idea into a pitchable business venture. They went through the same process, however, their backgrounds were very different. Why did we pick engineering and business students? Because the disciplines seem to be taught differently within today's educational environment. And we wanted to see whether a similar approach to teaching entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial mindset to them would generate similar results. Our assumption was, since engineers bring innovation and business students bring the mindset, integration of that can bring marketable innovation. And therefore, if we develop the mindset both in business students and in engineering students, the final outcome should be the drive to be successful in an innovation expert in the future. We repeated the same self-assessment survey at the end of the course. So as a reminder, they went from an original idea to a full-scale business plan in the course, following a very similar process, both in the commerce or business students and the engineering students. At the starting point, the assessment of the entrepreneurial mindset seems to have been more conservative for the engineering students in motivation to excel and leadership skills, whereas the commerce students were more afraid, so less courageous, and they had more motivation to excel and opportunity obsession. Of course, that is the key traits business school teaches, therefore that wasn't unexpected. What was unexpected is that at the end of the course, the mindset of the engineering students grew substantially more than the one from the commerce students. The commerce students did become braver. However, the engineering students, now having a process available for them to scale their innovation into the marketplace, their opportunity obsession and motivation to excel grew quite a bit. And they also identified that through the tools that they were given, they can tolerate risk more successfully, and therefore they can also lead their teams better. Overall, the growth of the mindset from the engineering students was higher than from the commerce students. So what does that mean for entrepreneurship education and practice? Overall, what we have seen is that the project-based approach that we have taken in that particular course has a positive influence on the entrepreneurial mindset. We have therefore concluded that entrepreneurial mindset can be taught and students can develop that business acumen that they would need to turn innovation into successful business practices. There seems to be a small disciplinary influence as well, but surprisingly, the engineering mindset grew higher than the commerce mindset in the students' population. We can derive that potentially to the fact that the students were presented with a structured process of launching a venture and bringing innovation into the market, and that gave them a process where they can mitigate risk and failure and achieve successful outcomes. Overall, it is worth noting that this was just a simple experiment. It was just there to start a conversation on whether it would be beneficial to include some sort of entrepreneurial education in engineering disciplines in order to drive the final outcome, successful innovation in the market. If interested in continuing this conversation, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And thank you for your attention.
Greetings to all. I'm Dr. Sudhir Vardarajan. I'll be speaking about my paper, Measuring the Value of Systems Thinking for Design-Centric Engineering Education. A little bit of Context. I come from an institute called IIITDM Kanchipuram, which is one of the public funded institutions in India, focused on bringing together a new model of engineering which combines STEM and humanities through design. And it's based in South India, Chennai. The model which we have implemented in the last 5 years in 2014 was essentially a design-centric engineering program where the core engineering courses, those basic sciences and engineering courses, are also coupled with a set of design and management courses right from the first semester onwards. Now, among these, systems thinking is one of the key courses which is introduced in the third semester with an intent to help engineers connect the business, design, and technology elements. It starts off with a focus on functional identification, need identification in the semester 3, and through a problem-based model, the students are taken through a process where they discover the behavior structure and then build a prototype. And this whole thing is oriented towards new product conceptualization and realization. Now, the process we have followed for promoting the systems thinking competence primarily involved these 4 broad steps. Starting with helping students to identify their own priorities, interests, and by reflecting on why they have joined an engineering program and what they have been doing so far and so on. And then through some social interaction, get more clarity on their interests and others' interests, and then converge towards a topic of interest. Then as a group of maximum size 4, they explore the problem to understand all facets of the problem, which means understanding the complexity in the real world. And then start by writing a problem description document. This is the first order abstraction they do, and which eventually leads to a second order abstraction through use of various systems modeling methods. And a model like this, an example of tea we have shown here, is to understand what innovation is possible in the tea industry by looking closely at the dynamics of tea making and so on. And in turn, this systems model becomes a space for looking at opportunities for improvement. And what we have clearly seen is that there is a need for a model that measures the systems thinking competence in individuals and groups, and in modeling the real world complexity, and for product design and innovation. So what is that model which we have implemented in the last 5 years? It's a very simple model based on the basic principles of complexity, which is complexity of any system is a function of the number of elements, the relationships, and the patterns of relationships, and the content of those parts. So taking this as a basis, we had started looking at these 5 elements, which is how students are able to identify elements, how they are able to link relationships, how they are able to classify the elements or distinguish them, and see patterns, which is hierarchical, centrality, and so on, and also use of metaphors. And in the process, we have also checked with literature and found that while there are several models to measure systems thinking competence, the couple of ones which we found very close to what we have done is the DSRP model, as well as the complexity metrics used in product design. The intent overall is to see how to connect the dots across the business to technology and design. And when we applied this model, the results are very promising, in the sense the model is clearly able to distinguish competence at different levels, the low, medium, and high competence among students. Second is clearly there is a difference in terms of the higher level competencies. When you talk about seeing patterns and use of metaphors, there is a clear distinction between those underperforming students and the better performing students. Second is that our model is also been able to distinguish the individual ability. So this process which we adopted, the first question that we ask them on self-discovery, and there is a qualitative assessment we do on the same 5 parameters. We have seen that that's a very strong predictor of the overall performance of the student. And finally, and we also, while a lot of this group work was done, We also did a comparison with the group performance and overall individual performance, taking the whole course, including other assignments, exams, and so on. And clearly, we have seen that there is a case for at least 65% students to bring them into a better position for them to do this abstraction. While there is a lot more improvement required in the way they pay attention to detail and so on. So that's one of the key things which has led to some resequencing of our courses in the current year. So with this, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for the time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Sumbul Khan, research scientist from the SUTD MIT International Design Center based at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. Today I'll be presenting our paper on the state of design education in Singapore, Insights from the Design Education Summit 2018. This paper was written with my colleagues, Dr. Paula Silva and Professor Lucian Blessing from Singapore University of Technology and Design. Design is viewed not only as an important tool for fostering business and technological innovation, but also as a vital approach in education. In Singapore, a top national report advises to infuse design into the national skill set.
It looks like there's one technical issue. Let me try refresh in a moment.
Hello everyone, I am Sumbul. Advises to infuse design into the national skill set.
I'm sorry, it looks like that the problem is on the original video.
Hello everyone, I am Sumbul Khan. Furthermore, project-based Although the value of design education is understood, its open-ended, project-based nature makes it a notoriously difficult subject to teach and assess. Furthermore, design tends not to be a teaching specialization. Given the importance of design as a strategic competence, there is a significant need to consider the systematic implementation of design in the educational system, in this case, the Singaporean education system. Our research questions are: what are the main issues in the current state of design education in Singapore? What are the similarities and differences in issues across levels or types of education? What are possible solutions? And what are the recommendations to promote design education in the Singaporean education system? Data for this study was collected from a two-day workshop at the Design Education Summit, a conference for educators in Singapore. The summit was intended to provide a platform for educators from different types of educational institutes in Singapore to network and exchange ideas on the adoption of design in education. A total of 214 participants attended the summit, representing 64 educational institutes. The most commonly reported issues and challenges across the institutes are the inclusion of design education within the curriculum, the support needed, and the change of mindsets across all stakeholders, and assessment of design learning. The solutions generated by participants emphasize the need for mindset changes, for a culture and environment that allows risk-taking and views failure as important drivers of learning, for stepwise introduction, and for ways to teach, encourage, and assess typical design skills and competencies. The solutions also show the wish to introduce design as a part of the Institute's culture and to form communities of practice. Our future work includes a detailed analysis of all documented issues, challenges, problem statements, and solutions that were collected, not only
I apologize for these technical issues. Unfortunately, I'm not able to resolve them at the moment, so I'm kindly asking Dr. Khan to elaborate the missing voice parts in the discussion session. The Professor Erickson, please unmute your microphone.
Sorry. Yes, can we go to the 5th presentation and then see if maybe you can do it online, so to say?
I will proceed with the next presentation.
Yes.
Once again, I'm sorry to Dr. Khan.
But maybe if you can, someone can, if you can.
Yeah, and I'm going to present you the work Mapping Impact of Design Thinking in Teamwork, Problem Solving, and Creativity. One of the most popular definitions describes design thinking as a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. And design thinking has gained popularity in universities during the last decade. Nevertheless, we found that authors have argued lack of systematic assessment of design thinking results, as well as lack of accurate performance-based measures of design thinking. So it urges the development of comprehensive design thinking assessment approaches. Also, a review carried out by the authors shows that most mentioned outcomes of design thinking in higher education are teamwork, problem solving, and creativity. So, what is the design thinking impact on teamwork, problem solving, and creativity of students in higher education? We pose 3 hypotheses. First, students under a design thinking intervention improves their teamwork skills throughout the intervention. The second one, it's about the problem solving skills, and the third one about creativity skills. In this study, 136 students participated, as well as 4 facilitators. We carried out this study in Espoir University in Ecuador in a course where the students develop a project solving a real problem with a real sponsor with the same team during the whole semester. So we assessed the 3 outcomes. The intervention lasts the whole semester, and we collected data at 3 time points. This is the model that we use in SPOL, this double diamond model based on the UK Design Council approach, and also the DS School in Stanford. The whole semester is composed by 14 weeks. The first 7 weeks, students learn about research, empathy, and design, and they apply in their projects. And in the other half of the semester, they learn about ideation, prototype, and validation. So we collected data at 3 time points. In each time point, we assessed problem solving and creativity, but there were 3 evaluators: the students as self-evaluators, peers, and facilitators. We use rubrics based on the value rubrics developed by the AACNU, and in the teamwork, all the evaluators evaluated the perceived performance inside the teams during the course. And for problem solving and creativity, they use a case study with 5 questions, the same case study and the same questions at 3 time points. The approach used was within group repeated measures ANOVA, and in the results we saw that the teamwork, right, it was only a significant improvement when we see the peers evaluation. It was not significant when we see students self-evaluation and facilitators. So we can say that in the case of facilitators, they didn't have enough information about students' performance inside the teams. And there are other studies where also teamwork those studies reported no impact on teamwork after a design thinking intervention using self-evaluation instruments. In the case of problem solving, the 3 results from students' pearson evaluation showed a significant improvement. And well, we also found in the literature some other studies that also reported positive impact on problem solving. In creativity, it is similar because for students' pearson evaluation, we also noticed a significant improvement. And also there are some studies that also found a positive impact on this outcome after a design thinking intervention. It is also interesting to see that in all cases for teamwork, problem solving, and creativity, peers and facilitators who share more or less the same role seem to agree on the way of scoring throughout the study. There are some limitations in this study that we can talk about it during the conference, and this is my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you can hear me now. I suggest that the Sam will count. If you want, you can present some of some that we missed in your presentation. Do you want to do this?
Dr.
Are you
Khan,
there?
Dr. Khan wrote in the chat that she has a connection issues and that she preferred the chat to address her issues. So she's not able to speak.
Okay. So thank you very much for the presentations. There is a possibility for the audience to raise questions in the chat, but also if there is some questions and comments from the speakers, you're more than welcome. No questions, comments?
I have a question relating to the first presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the final conclusion there was design thinking, entry-level course for higher education or engineering education. My question is, should it just be one course or should one look at a sequence of courses? Because one course may not really inculcate or bring about a change in that behavior. So looking at a set of sequence of courses where the behavior is cultivated, wouldn't it be a better option?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a very interesting question, I must say. And I think that, or the idea of the statement is, of course, a little bit, provocative and controversial to compare this with the 4-course, the design thinking approach. I see it a little bit as a sort of preparation, and to teach also people from non-design backgrounds some kind of designerly thinking skills. And in a way, at the Bauhaus, the idea of this consecutive model of the curriculum was leading towards one specific goal, which was the architectural building workshop. And I think that in the design thinking, I would see it more as a foundation of this multidisciplinarity and teamwork, as we have also heard in the last presentation. So so I think, of course, more would not do any harm to have like more than just one course, but I think that the main goal, if we consider design thinking as some kind of foundation for other disciplines, then these other disciplines should then continue with their own expertise. So that's my opinion on that. I hope that this answers your question.
I see that Sharon wanted to say something.
Yes, hi. And thank you, Katia, also because I found very interesting your presentation. I wanted to add something that happens in my university at SPOL. The course that I presented in my paper is actually a first year course. It's mandatory for all freshmen from all disciplines, because we have also social sciences and business and everything. So actually the groups are mixed. And in the university, we have seen the necessity to not only put the course at the beginning, which we consider it's very important, because it's like since the beginning you put this mindset in the students to be more human-centered when they solve problems, right? To have this more empathetic, let's say, mindset when they are trying to solve anything in any discipline. But also, for example, in SPOL, we also have another course in the middle of their careers where they all, again, apply the same thinking, but for projects related specifically to their own disciplines. And at the end, in the capstone course, which they take at the end of their studies in order to graduate, they also have to present a project solving a real problem with a real sponsor. We call sponsors. So I think that it's important to reinforce, this design thinking methodology in order to promote, for example, the skills that these are the so-called 21st century skills like teamwork, creativity, problem solving. And I think that if we only teach this methodology, or we promote this design thinking methodology at the beginning, probably the students can lose all these things that they learned during the time, because let's say that only at the beginning they learned that, but then all the rest of the courses, it's in a traditional way or in other way, probably it can be lost. So I think it's important to reinforce during the academic program. That's my point of view.
Thank you very much for that insight. May I respond quickly?
Yes.
Because I did not mean that this design thinking education should necessarily be at the beginning of other educational programs. So the forecourse was a metaphor, so to say, what was more meant as an analogy to this kind of foundational skills. But I think they can be implemented or integrated also at later stages of the program. And actually, I think maybe that makes more sense. So in that sense, I totally agree with your comment. And the example of the design thinking school that we studied, the HPI in Potsdam, that is actually a further educational program. So the students are not freshmen; they are in their, let's say, fifth semester of their major program, and then they go and take up these design thinking skills. So in a way, it is not located at the beginning of the curriculum necessarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Nosha, fine.
Hi, so can you hear me okay? Because I'm having a bit of connection issues.
Yes.
Excellent. So just as a side note, I teach at a business school, and the Masters of Innovation and Entrepreneurship program, we introduced design thinking as the second course after the Creating New Venture course. And it changes the mindset of the students 300%. So I would actually agree with Shannon that design thinking as a problem solving. So we focus it on a problem solving and customer centric approach, right? The business schools then completely, I think, change the design thinking as, designers understand it in a different way, but it completely changes the way students approach problems and how they're able to rapidly search for solutions and validate the solutions within the space of what they do. so innovations or, you know, creating their ventures. So I would agree with Sharon. And I guess, Katja, with you particularly in the term that it needs to be a pre-course of some sort. But I believe, having worked across disciplines in a variety of spaces, that actually the skill set, so not the process of it, but the skill set and mindset that it brings should actually be taught it in pretty much any discipline. And in all honesty, so I have, this is just as a personal note that might not be completely irrelevant, I have an 11-year-old son, and I've run him, Mama does an experiment, through the process. And the shift in the way he approaches problems has changed massively. So I think we actually need to push it way beyond just teaching it at a university level and within design, and, you know, the business has stolen pieces of it, but we might want to shift it even closer down as a, well, the pre-course and kind of building the mindset type of way. So just as an insight from a business school prof, I guess.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Can I add a little bit of a comment if you're able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just building upon the ideas which have, you know, you have already voiced, and I'll say it very quickly because of my connection issues. It's just that, you know, I find that at my university, yes,
Yes, I have a question,
you know, a lot of
for
students.
your presentation, but I don't know if we are waiting for someone that wants to ask something or not. Are we waiting for somebody or not?
For somebody.
Oh, please, Dr. Khan, continue, and then Sharon ask a question.
Yeah, but somebody
okay.
yeah.
Yes. So just,
okay.
you know, I was just
Yes,
relating
I'm very interested also in your presentation, because entrepreneurial mindset learning is something that we also want to try at my university. And I wonder, why do you think that, how can we interpret these results that for administration related students, right, the impact of the EML is less than engineering? I mean, only for engineering is, you know, very significant, but administrators naturally or because of their background, the impact is not the same? Or how do you think we can explain those results?
So, can you please take this, answer this question in relation to what you're trying to say now, as far as you have this?
Yeah, I was trying to build a different point, though. I mean, the point that was built up about, you know, students learning design thinking and students learning design thinking early on. I find that at my university, particularly, I find the ones who are kind of have only learned design thinking, I find them a bit indoctrined, and I find that, you know, they are able only to think in a particularly way. They think design thinking is the ground truth, and there cannot be any truth beyond that. So, you know, I hear that conversation about, okay, let's start design thinking earlier and earlier and earlier, and I feel that there's a little bit of concern there that, you know, should students not be exposed to other kinds of thinking, that there could be other kinds of truths, that there are other ways of designing. So that was the comment on the rest. And for your question, Katja, you know, in our study was more about school students and implementing design in education. So that's a bit different from the rest of the studies here, which were largely about engineering education and university level education. We were actually looking at how teachers at school level, primary, secondary level, they are using design to teach within their curriculum, how they're changing mindsets of themselves, their children, and the students. And in Singapore particularly, academics is very different. The approach to academics teaching is very, very different. It's a very curriculum-oriented approach. So teaching those design skills to teachers, we're trying to get them to inculcate creativity and an open mindset in students. So that is the way our study is a bit different from the others, where we weren't really discussing engineering education. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I have a little bit of a time delay here. Thank you very much for that comment. I think there was like two parts of the comment. I would like to respond to the first one, which was more like criticizing the design thinking should be taught all over the place. And I really liked that. And I was hoping to receive this kind of controversial feedback on my statement. And I would like just to mention that maybe you heard it also, but last week Ursula von der Leyen, a German politician who is currently the president of the European Commission, announced that a statement where she says we need a new European Bauhaus. And so I would like to maybe turn the discussion a little bit to the Bauhaus side again, because what she suggested is that this Bauhaus concept of designerly ways of thinking should be taught in multidisciplinary teams. She says students, designers, architects, artists, and engineers should work together to solve today's challenges. And I believe that this resembles somehow what I meant with the statement, so that the design thinking does exactly that. So to teach designerly ways of thinking and multidisciplinary teams to people from different backgrounds and to other disciplines. And I think this is something that is sort of the educational model of the future in the design context, in my opinion. But it was not meant to be like teaching design thinking only, but sort of on top of the disciplinary skills of each discipline.
More questions and comments? Yes, okay.
So just kind of to refer back to, I wasn't saying that I think design thinking should be taught everywhere. What I was saying is that the approaches, so the problem solving, it's currently called design thinking within business. In all honesty, if I do a research paper about what design thinking is in design and what design thinking is in business, they are two completely separate concepts. Right? Because they are just called the same, but the way they're approached within a particular discipline is very different. However, like Tanya said, this designery way of thinking, so we call it in the business school, we call it the rapid problem solving of, you called it wicked, we called it complex problems, right? But just the mindset of talking with us, it's talking to the customer and engaging and understanding the problem before you go into a solution, because it can help you generate solution better. That is what we call design thinking. And the mindset behind that, and as you've seen from the presentation, mindsets are the things that I'm really interested in. The mindset behind it, I was able to test with my son as much as I'm able to test with my students. And I think it's an approach to problem solving that can help build then the disciplinary knowledge and help experts cope with problems and deal and find solutions better. So I think one thing that we agree probably to disagree on is what design thinking in its core is for disciplines. I think, going back to some of the concepts of the Bauhaus, and I don't understand it in enough depth to be able to define it, but pooling things from different disciplines that help a rounded solution to a problem is what we're aiming for within the business space, right? And that was where I was getting for, and I could see how my son, just by getting him the understanding of how things can be done in that kind of way, helped him solve problems better. So that was what I was referring to. And then if I could just answer Sharon's question, I think it was addressed to me before she got kicked out. So with us, it was just an experiment in terms of identifying what barriers are there to getting innovation out there. And we defined entrepreneurship as being able to market and sell the innovation. So the engineer's assumption is we will do the innovation, whereas the marketer's assumption is we need to sell it. And the entrepreneurship is the process connecting all of it. And the way different disciplines are taught, so the admin that you refer to are taught the whole problem solving set of skills and are given the processes and are also less risk averse than the engineering students are. So the way when we were able to give them a process and we taught it as a process, so this is your venture creation process, this is step 1, step 2, step 3. They got braver in the terms that they had evidence, so evidence-based teaching, the venture they're launching will be successful. And we assume that that is what influenced the outcome. But we just kind of did it, like Katja said, I put a controversial statement. We just did an experiment within 2 disciplines to try to figure out whether there is relevance to what entrepreneurs do that go beyond, you know, just your serial entrepreneur Steve Jobs type of person, that can help other disciplines in marketing and selling whatever they are developing.
Can I have a comment myself? I think because in Sweden you have on the curriculum already in the preschool that you should educate in entrepreneurship. So you have entrepreneurship in a school setting, and which is also something that can be discussed. Is it something that you can learn from the very beginning, and what will the outcome be then later on? So it's if you're interested in that, Nosha, you can have. I have a former PhD student, and she wrote her doctoral thesis about this. So
that would be so I absolutely, yeah, thrilled to look at that. So because with us it's the big discussion and the realization. So my first lecture that I ever teach in my entrepreneurship courses is entrepreneurship can be taught, right? Yeah. And then I put a position, and about half of the class always disagrees with me, and then we go through the process, and then I ask the question again, right? Yeah.
But the question, what is entrepreneurship? This is also a question of definition. But I also have a question for you, Katja. If I understood you right, that you mean that in because I have some knowledge in Bauhaus and in design thinking, of course, but as I have understood Bauhaus, every single individual have a more interdisciplinary approach. They have different skills, while D school is more discussing that you are combining people, you're combining skills in a group. So the group is interdisciplinary, but every individual are disciplinary, so to say.
That's correct. That is, I mean, the goal of the paper was to compare both approaches, and they are not the same, apparently. They have similarities and they have differences. And one of the differences, or the similarities, maybe first to start with, is the interest and the focus on multidisciplinarity. But they both, lived it in a different way. So, at the Bauhaus, as you said correctly, it was more found in individual people. So also the students were educated in order to, go through all these different steps of the course to learn the different skills, so that they become multidisciplinary individuals, and the teachers as well. And at the design thinking, mostly programs, I think it's more like found that teams are created where disciplinary individuals bring in their expertise. And I think this is not necessarily a contradiction, but more of a different development. So because I think that maybe this is also in relation to the socioeconomic context that was different at the time of the Bauhaus. Yeah. And that today we need more these different expertise from different sides, and also, let's say, other non-creative disciplines to work together. And that's why I think the design thinking education is the next step, so to say, of the Bauhaus.
Because I think it's interesting you brought up the political dimension, and I remember it's almost 20 years now ago when I teach for industrial design students about Bauhaus, and I'm talking about the political statement that was in the Bauhaus, and it was also a political movement, and they were very surprised. They couldn't understand how could it come that design could be political. And this is something that I think it's interesting, because it was political before, and I think it started to become more political again.
That is correct. And also a very interesting point that I elaborate in the paper a little bit more in depth about this political situation and the context and so on. Maybe one interesting fact about the Bauhaus is that it was publicly funded. So it was always kind of influenced and dependent on the public money and the political situation, which was, of course, very difficult at that time. Whereas the D school of the HBI that I used as a comparative case is publicly funded, so they are far less dependent on any political or
So just one interjection. So I'm very curious to know, was Bauhaus also a commercial entity or a commodity the way design thinking is? Because design thinking has become a commodity which is sold in workshops. There's so many institutes and organizations which have come up who are selling design thinking. I've seen design thinking workshops for parenting, for design your life, for practically everything. Was Bauhaus being packaged that way and sold?
I think no. The point of course, the Bauhaus existed only for 14 years, and it was closed in 1933 because of the start of the Nazi regime overtaking and so on. And many of the former students and teachers of the Bauhaus then migrated into other countries, and they took the ideas with them. So I think it was not, like you phrased it, a marketing aspect, but more a development due to the political situation. So people left the country and they took this concept with them, and then they founded the new Bauhaus in Chicago, for example, and there are other institutions that followed this concept. But it's not such a marketing thing. But of course, during the times of the Bauhaus, also the designs and the products and so on were very well published and marketed, and there were exhibitions and also a lot of collaborations with industry and so on. So in that sense, maybe yes, they tried to sell their products and market their concepts, but the whole package of the Bauhaus itself, I think, was not such a big marketing success as the design thinking is today.
Yeah, I mean, I as I see it, I mean, I would think that, Bauhaus, it was picked up by schools and it was still a kind of a design elite which talked about Bauhaus or took it and incorporated it in their thinking, whereas design thinking is something that, anybody can do DT. That's what it is, right? It's commodified and democratized that anybody can become like a design thinking facilitator very, very quickly. It doesn't take much of a learning curve, primarily because I think that design thinking concepts are things that we've already known. They're just packaged in a different way. So it's like anybody can teach design thinking. For Bauhaus, you'd still need to get into and read a couple of books.
I would say this is also a very provocative and controversial statement. I'm not sure that I would agree that anybody could teach design thinking and become a design thinking course. But maybe somebody else would like to pick up on that.
Yeah,
point.
And I think it's important also to define what do we mean by design. It's very often that you read papers and see presentations about design thinking, but no one define what do they mean about design in that context. So please, Nusha, you want to say something?
I lost my mute button there for a second. So I was going to say exactly what Katja said. So it's become abused, right? The word design thinking as such has become abused, because you're right, everybody can teach it, right? So I'm a business school professor, have a background in engineering, doesn't matter, but I teach at a business school, and the way we teach design is very different from the way I was taught design when I was at the engineering school, or design thinking, right? It's become like innovation, like entrepreneurship, like, any other big buzzwords. It's become abused and it's become a concept. So I talked to a designer about a decade ago when design thinking was kind of on the up, and she said, but that's what we do, right? That is what designers do. Whereas we made it in business a really huge thing. So it's, I think, going back to the definition, and I agree with Katja that by no means can anybody teach design thinking. We can say we teach design thinking, but conceptually it depends what we're showing there. So as I said, our design thinking approach at this business school is very different from the one in a design school or a D school, right? We all claim that we go through the D school process and we all do the 60-minute whatever gift-giving.
Okay, I'm sorry, Nusha, but Petra would like to say something, and we are running out of time. I think you're muted, Petra.
Thank you very much. But I like your comment very much in the when you say design thinking concepts are things we already know and we have already practiced, but they are different brought together. So if you look at design methodology, what is design methodology? If you look at the different pieces of design methodology, you will find and come up to the same, to very similar concepts. So that means we have had this knowledge, but it's now very brought together in a way that people are convinced out of it. And this is, of course, also an issue. Are you able with your concept to convince people from all kind of directions? So therefore, I think it's interesting to look at the how it is used, and I agree also. I think that there are as many design thinking schools as there are concepts, so that means each school has its own, or as apart from the concepts which are agreed upon, there are also own ideas which are specific to this design thinking school. In the end, I think it's good to have a kind of let's say knowledge which is shared by a lot of people. But on the other hand, I'm also not so convinced that it is really shared, that we not only think that we share it, but in fact there is more individualism in it than we think in the moment.
Thank you. I think we are running out of time. It's 16:17. Thank you very much for your presentations and for the discussion. It has been very lively and interesting to follow. Is there anyone who would like to make a comments before we end this session?
Congratulations for all your presentations, and thank you for sharing your work. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you all. Please join us in Gather Town for follow-up discussion. The link is in the chat for the social event. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.